Hello everybody and welcome to DimeHead. My name is Phil and today's video we're going to explore DimeHead NAMM player's capabilities in regard of MIDI, going to talk about some basic MIDI setups in tandem with the M-VAVE Chocolate MIDI controller. Throughout the last years we've seen a huge uptick in interest in small form factor preamp boards, whether it being modelers, capturing technology, or actually also analog preamps. We got a ton of stuff going on the market currently, ranging from the Tonix ecosystem to Sonic Cake Matribox, and also, of course, DimeHead's NAMM player. And with the risen interest in these type of devices, we also had a huge resurgence of MIDI controllability. And with that, we got a huge interest in MIDI-capable controller boards, such as this over here. This over here is the M-VAVE Chocolate MIDI controller. This over here is a super affordable MIDI controller with 4 foot switches. As you can see, this costs around about 20 to 40 euros depending on where you're buying it, and this is compatible with a plethora of different devices. This is very often seen with the Tonix One. However, we also got some requests over here to showcase it together with DimeHead's NAMM player, so that's exactly what we're going to do. When it comes to MIDI, there are a few terms which we have to talk about. There's channels, there's program changes, and there's control changes. Let's first talk about channels. Now, MIDI operates on a variety of different channels. Most devices by default are working on channel 1. This is exactly what we got over here. You got to make sure that whatever is sending out the MIDI commands, such as the M-Wave, and the receiving unit, the DimeHead NAMM player in this case, are working on the same channel so that they're basically talking to each other and listening to each other respectively. Then we got program changes and control changes. Program changes are basically exactly the same thing like preset changes. When I initiate a program change on the DimeHead NAMM player, it's the same thing as if I would be pressing the respective button in order to reach that particular preset. When we're talking about control changes, that's a little bit more complicated because we are now talking about parameters which we are controlling. For example, your volume of the preset is one of those control changes which you can initiate. Another one is the mid knob, the treble knob, the bass knob, the wet-dry setup on your delay, stuff like that. All of that can be controlled with control changes and even more. So that basically brings a plethora of different options which you can achieve with any type of MIDI controller, whether it being just a single knob setup, which we have like over here, or if you're actually having like an additional expression pedal, which you can also hook up to this particular setup, but which I don't have. For that, we're not going to cover that. But first things first, we first got to find out what we actually can change MIDI-wise on the DimeHead NAMM player. And in order to do that, you can go over to DimeHead's webpage under the link, which is going to be down below over here. And there you can see the entire MIDI mapping of the DimeHead NAMM player. Let's check out the MIDI mapping, which you can find on the DimeHead webpage over here. Now, I got a special trick up my sleeve over here. I got a USB MIDI interface, which I've hooked up through the MIDI out into the MIDI in of the DimeHead NAMM player over here, and that allows for Web MIDI API to be working together with the DimeHead NAMM player. That means that through the means of this MIDI mapping, I can actually change stuff on the pedal, which is pretty cool, which it kind of makes this work as an online editor, if you want to speak so. However, this is not a full-featured editor. This is still experimental. The main settings are still to be done on the pedal itself. However, it's fun to check out and play a little bit around with that one. So let's just go ahead. You can see over here I got the MIDI Link Mini set up, and the channel is set to 1. On the NAMM player itself, it's also set to 1. Let's check that out. I got the NAMM player now engaged. What we want to do in order to check out the MIDI channel is go to the settings menu, press on the param button, and then we can set over here the MIDI channel to Omni, so it basically receives on whatever channel you're sending it in, or we can set up a very specific channel of the respective, up to channel 16 I think is what we can choose from, and then let's leave it at Omni where it is currently, and then go out of this menu over here. So it's now basically talking on the right channel because it's set up to whatever channel it's receiving stuff from. And now we can go ahead and in theory set up program changes, which are preset changes. If I want to just load in from clean, which is my first preset to my third preset, for example, which is my rhythm high gain, I would initiate a program change over here, and then I would move over to my preset number 3. Pretty cool stuff, in my opinion. And now I could do that with whatever, you know, with whatever program change I fancy with. I can now click around and it does the respective change on the NAMP player. That already gets me pretty excited, to be honest. Now let's move over to control changes. Control changes work on the basis that you first enter what control change you want to do. So you got a number which is assigned to a specific parameter. For example, the volume of my preset is assigned to the control change 14, and then you got a value which ranges usually between 0 and 127, and that's gonna basically translate to the change which you're gonna see over here. So when I go over here now and set up the volume, you can see it's currently based on 8.0 on the NAMP player pedal. If I now go ahead and move it, it's gonna basically follow my volume knob in the MIDI editor or in the MIDI mapping according to whatever it references between 0 and 127. So you kind of get a feeling, you know, somewhere around here is 100 as a value. Not exactly sure because we're not seeing the actual value, but we can see it's that basically responds to 7.9 on the pedal over here. And we can do that for a lot of different stuff over here. We can set up the gain that way. We can set up the bass itself, like the bass value, but we can also change stuff like the bass frequency and the Q factor of the bass frequency, which we talked about in the video where we're talking about the EQ and the tone stack. We can do the same stuff for the mids and the treble as well. We can turn on the effects loop, turn it off. We can toggle it actually, so that way when you're having like, you know, like a foot switch, which is assigned to initiate a control change on 22, it's gonna toggle the effects loop on off, so that way you can only assign a single foot switch to turn on or off the effects loop. Pretty cool stuff. You can disable or enable or toggle it actually with the boost and like effects NAMP pop-up, which is super cool. We got all of these different things which we can toggle on off. We got a tap tempo for the delay. Nice stuff. We're not going to dive into all of that stuff with the M-VAVE Chocolate. We're going to kind of focus on some very basic commands just to get you started over here. But it's really cool that we have that possibility that we can set up those things. Pretty powerful MIDI mapping which we got over here. And of course, this is always subject to change, subject to be enhanced by the developers behind the NAMP player. I now got everything set up over here so that we can actually explore the M-VAVE Chocolate together with the DimeHead NAMP player. Now, apologies that this window is, or this, you know, like the screen is fairly small. I unfortunately need the rest of the real estate of the screen for the editing program of the M-VAVE Chocolate. You're going to see that in a moment. There is a software which is called Cube Suite, which is able to allow you to control the M-VAVE Chocolate when connected via a USB. You can also set up an app on your Android smartphone. However, I like to do things on the PC, so that's what we're going for over here. So, USB connection to my PC is making this indicate as foot control. I'm going to select that one. Then the editor software opens up over here, and you can see now the entire editing software in its glory. I made also a tutorial on how to set things up in my Tonex video, so you might want to check that as a cross-reference in case something is unclear in this video. At first, you can select the MIDI interface type to either expression pedal or TRS MIDI. What is meant with that is that this, you know, like this jack over here can either be fitted in to connect to an expression pedal, because this over here also has a wireless connectivity where you in theory could just use a wireless dongle to connect to the DimeHead NAMP player, or you can use this as the actual MIDI connection. In that case, you need a TRS to MIDI cable, which I got over here. There are different types, be aware of that. We need MIDI type A pin layout to DIN. So MIDI TRS type A to DIN is what you want to search for on the internet. There's, I think, one cable from here, Rockboard, which actually works pretty well with that one. In my case, I just soldered my own cable, which works really well in this regard. Next up, we got mode selection. We got different stuff going on. We can set up program change A. Here you can actually read the respective explanations. A to D keys are used to send the PC code, so the program change code. E and F keys are turned groups. A total of 8 groups, and blah, 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 and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to read all of the different explanations over here. You can read that through. I personally like to go with the advanced custom mode because this allows full flexibility in setting up this stuff over here. Once you have chosen the mode selection, you gotta choose which foot switch you want to set up. So it's either foot switch A, B, C, or D, which is obviously A, B, C, or D. Yeah, you have no possibility to set up stuff for E and F, which is pressing both of them at the same time. That's reserved for the actual modes which you got over here, which I'm not caring about. So we got the different foot switches which we want to assign, and then you can select the so-called stampede mode. Basically, this is when is stuff supposed to happen. Is it when you are pressing stuff? Is it when you are just tapping stuff? When you are pressing it for a longer time? And so on and so forth. In my case, I want to have stuff happen whenever I press the button. And most MIDI controllers work in that way, that they only react once you press and then release. I don't want that to happen. I want to have it on the press down action to actually do something. That's why I'm selecting this option over here. Mode, press down, release, 2 sets of information. Now in theory, you could do some very interesting stuff with this where you are pressing down a button, stuff changes, and as soon as you release it, you go back to the original state. This is what the A bank and the B bank are for. In my case, I'm kind of abusing this and just using the A bank to do my press down stuff, and on the B bank, so when it's released, I'm doing nothing. What am I doing over here? That is exactly what is set in this list over here. Let's click on this over here and check out what we got. So on channel 1, I'm sending a program change with the data set 0. That means on channel 1, I'm sending something which would change a preset, and I am choosing to send the very first preset, because when it comes to counting values in MIDI, you got to start by 0 up to 127 instead of how we think logically, starting at 1 and then counting up to 128. So it's just the way it works. You know, like if you're familiar with bytes and bits and counting in in binary code, then you are very familiar with what I'm talking about over here. So that's the way we are counting stuff. So data 0 would basically apply to the first preset, and 1 to the second preset, 2 to the third preset, and so on and so forth. And that is exactly what I got set on the respective foot switches over here. So basically, we are just counting from preset 1 to preset 4, depending on where I'm pressing my button over here. Let's try this out. Pressing number 1, you can see that this over here lights up over there. Pressing number 2, it goes over there. Pressing number 3, goes over there. Pressing number 4, there. This over here pressing down is the same as if I would be pressing this over here. This is just spaced out a little bit wider, making it a little bit easier to not accidentally hit one of those foot switches. Therefore, that's the main reason why we kind of moved over to use the M-VAVE Chocolate when doing our preset switches over here. Really cool stuff which you can assign. Now, we're gonna go a little bit deeper into control changes. So I now opened the MIDI mapping, and let me first explain what I got over here signal chain wise. I got this Solar guitar, which is going straight into the DimeHead NAND player. Then I got an Corona chorus from TC Electronic, this green little pedal over here, which you only can see halfways, that is connected through the effects loop of the DimeHead NAND player, and then this is all controlled by the M-VAVE Chocolate, and I'm going through an XLR cable into my interface. This is going to be important because I want to kind of showcase different features which you got over here. Now, what I want to first do as an experimental thing is I want to set up that when I press on the red button over here, which is my third button, I just go simply to the preset which is preset number 3. So that already is basically set up in the software. As you can see over here on foot switch C, we got a program change to 2, which is my 3rd preset. So far, so good. Next up, when I press this over here, this 4th button, I want to toggle on and off the effects loop. It's gonna have the same effect as if I would go overhead to this small icon over here in the corner and press this on or off. Let me showcase what this does. This engages basically the TC electronic chorus over here. So it's turned off currently, I believe. And on. All right, so let's try to assign this to this MIDI switch over here, number 4. So we're gonna go to the cube suite and we're gonna select foot switch number D. We're gonna remove the actions which we're setting up. We're gonna now look at the control change, which is number 22. Does that work? Yeah, you can set 2 banks of MIDI information A and B. Each time you press the nail and lift it, the 2 banks will be sent in turn. Yeah, so we're gonna basically flip-flop around between the 2 values. So we're gonna have it when I press it, then we're gonna have 1, and when I press it once again, we're gonna have the control change on 22 to be 0. Let's see if that works. So. Pretty cool stuff. All right, let's move over and now assign this over here that we want to engage another preset. For example, we want to have preset number 4 with that one. So I would go now to foot switch B and I would assign this now to the data point 3 on the PC because that's my preset number 4. So I would now go ahead and yeah, let's try that out. So we're currently on preset number 3, as you can see. Pressing on that one goes to number 4. Pressing on that one again goes to number 3. Pretty cool stuff. All right, now what I want to do is on this final step over here, as long as I press it, I want to have a super strong mid scoop on my sound, and as soon as I release it, I want everything to just simply move back to the regular preset. In order to do so, we gotta go to foot switch A, and we want to have, again, those 2 different modes where we got one press down set of information and one release set of information. And for that, we first got to find out what is the mid frequency setup. The mids control change is number 18, and the value in my case, to exaggerate things, would be 0. So we're gonna go over here. And we're now going to remove all of that one, and we're going to add another action on channel 1, control change on number 18, which is my mid setup, and the data point is on 0. And now there are different options which I can choose. Either I can just switch to the preset because we anyways got 0 milliseconds of preset switching gap, or I could just revert those CC settings which I just set. Because it's more logical, I will go with this setup over here, or this, so to speak. So that will basically put the mids to 0 if I press it, and when I release it, it's gonna put it back to 5.0, which is the default value which I got. So let's try out if that works. So in theory, you could now use this as a kill switch. Let's go ahead and actually use that as a kill switch. Let's play a little bit around. So we got the volume, which is number 14. So we're gonna change basically the value of the control change to 14. And I now just got to make sure we are currently at 8.0. Now I could crank out a calculator and I could just check out what is 80% of 128. So that would be round about 102. So we want to set our value over here because I already got the setup from 8.0 out of 10 to 102. So that way we're gonna kill switch it and go back to the original volume. But hang on, I made a mistake. Number 14, of course. So let's try that out. And that way you have a plethora of different options which you can choose from and full flexibility. You could actually now go ahead and set up an expression pedal and set it up to work as a wah pedal, you know, like shifting the frequencies and, you know, yeah, a lot of different stuff which you can actually do using MIDI programs and MIDI control changes on your DimeHead NAMM player pedal. Now granted, this tutorial turned out a little bit longer than I actually anticipated and expected it to be. However, I hope that you have learned something out of this particular tutorial. This was quite a lot requested and is often asked in the different forums where it's all about the DimeHead NAMM player. So hopefully this is gonna help you out, and see you in the next video.